going to talk about platforms for the whole week here, and we're going to talk today. We're going to open the whole thing with having a little bit of a pre-taste, if you will, with two persons here, Rich Bulger and Peter Evans. Peter is one of our team members that has been very active in leading the work on platforms that we're pursuing within the network. And they are going to talk about reverse logistics as a very important component in the ways in which platforms then can accelerate the larger transformations in form of circular economy. With that, we're actually covering then, as just to sort of give the background, we're covering yet another perspective on transformations in the larger sense. We've gone from various aspects, and now we're into how to scale up things, reaching out to the demand side, and the ways in which digitalization then can be a part in making the missing links between industries. Again, we've been talking about that innovation for transformation is not only about spurring sector innovation as we know it, but actually making the links. And the point here that we're going to go into is the ways in which then the platforms actually constitute the missing links between industries by creating markets. And that in turn now has an aspect that is the reverse logistics. So with that, I'll turn over to Immanuela, that's going to lead this discussion the ways in which she also leads the work stream. So over to you.
Thanks, Mikael, and also welcome to everyone here in the room, and welcome to everyone online. Thank you for joining us, and big thank you to the Network Summit, to the Network team. It's an amazing feat what you've been doing, all the preparation that's gone into this. So thank you so much for allowing us to host this side event here. And I'm especially excited because for those who have been following our Innovation Circle episodes, this is a special edition. So the first time we're in such a setting and such a impressive room, and of course delighted to have such great guests on today. So welcome, Peter and Rich. I hope you had arrived well and are enjoying Barcelona so far.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Love being in Barcelona, and thanks for inviting us for this conversation.
Of course, of course.
Yeah, my first time in Spain, so it's a beautiful day. Just got off the plane. I had a nice run through the city to get here, but I'm glad to be here.
And what a great way to start your first time in Barcelona with such an interesting discussion and interesting experts around the table.
Thrilled to be here.
So how about we just dive right into the topic? I mean, we're going to hear a lot about platforms, circular platforms over the next few days. So as was already said, we'll use this as a teaser, as an appetizer for what's to come also. But to start us off, so we've heard this phrase reverse logistics, and maybe we'll start off with you, Rich. What is reverse logistics? What does it entail? Why is it important?
Great question. And when I was asked to move my family to Fort Worth, Texas, after I started Verizon's trade-in program, presented it to the C-suite, I got a call from the vice president of supply chain, and she said, "Hey, Rich, I heard you're really good at reverse logistics. How would you like to move your family to Fort Worth and run Verizon's CRTC?" And my response was, "Well, that sounds super cool. Thank you for thinking of me, but I've got two questions. What is reverse logistics and what is a CRTC?" I was in a room with over 900 industry professionals at the Reverse Logistics Association show earlier this year, and I asked them to raise their hand if they ever took a course in supply chain or logistics, and a few hands went up. And I asked them to keep their hands up if they'd ever taken one course on reverse. And only one hand stayed up, but I recognized the gentleman because he was my professor in the class that I was taking. So I told him to put his hands down. But logistics at its core is movement from point to point. Forward logistics is moving to the point of use. Reverse logistics is moving away from that point. So if you've ever bought anything from Amazon, water bottle, you make it, you fill it, put a cap on it, you get it to the place. That is a forward logistics process. But what happens if the water bottle is not sold? What happens when it's done? How do you move it away? Is the foundation of reverse logistics.
Mm-hmm. So that comes at an especially important part of the discussion when we're talking about how to manage the circular economy transition, right? So maximizing the value within our supply chains, how can we capture more of the value within our supply chains? So very much playing into sort of the imperative that we're all faced with today, also our program countries that we work with. So maybe what are the main challenges you see in reverse logistics right now?
So the barrier to a circular economy is the linear economy. Make, use, dispose. Businesses, corporations, customers all align around the sale. You see the alignment through promotions. You see the alignment through customer promises that make it easy to go through. Try it for 30 days. We'll give you a 1-year warranty. Getting to the customer is very easy. One of the first known examples of a customer promise that I was able to find in my research was done by a guy named Aaron Montgomery Ward, mail order salesman in the 1890s, had a mail order catalog, and he wanted to inspire confidence in a purchase. So he said, if you don't like it, you can send it back. One of the first instances of reverse logistics applying to commerce. The very first Model Ts that rolled off the Ford assembly line with a warranty had a problem. The seats were manufactured with moss, and the moss that they put in the seats had bugs in it, chiggers. So the first automobiles that rolled off the assembly line had to come back in for a recall. And that created this mentality that all returns are a necessary evil. They're a bad thing that you want to go through and drive down. But the origin of reverse logistics was to drive sales by facilitating customer promises. Mm-hmm. And the way that COVID has went through and dramatically altered the way that customers shop now, rapidly accelerated telepresence, rapidly accelerated on telehealth, rapidly accelerated delivered home, rapidly accelerated omni-channel sales. The leadership in business moved to meet customers where they wanted to shop. But since reverse is at the end of the process, the policies around returns haven't changed as fast. In the US, online returns have a 17.7% return rate versus 10% in store when you can touch and feel something. The rules of what is new and used don't apply equally when you're talking about an industry like fashion. You know, if you go through and you want to try on 3 different jackets, you'll go through, you'll try them on, you'll pick the one that you want, and you'll go check out. The other 2 you'll put back on the shelf, even though they've only been superficially handled, they're still considered new. But in an online world, you must buy 3 things. So now you have 3 transactions. And if you apply the same rules of superficially handling, you're taking perfectly good stuff and writing it down in value. But that's a linear economy, make, use, dispose. The barrier to the circular economy where you're trying to promote reuse, I ran into this at Cisco, I ran into it at Verizon as well, where there wasn't a mechanism to give customers value back for their old things. I was told very clearly when I started Verizon's retail trading program that Verizon was a cell phone company, spelled S-E-L-L, not a buy phone company. So the thought of me giving value back to customers to apply that value towards a purchase, there wasn't mechanisms in place for that. There wasn't finance people that were trained in that. In fact, the mentality was all returns are bad. And in a circular economy, to me, the most effective way to measure the impact of a circular economy is to measure how many times a product goes from make to the first customer, through reverse logistics back to a place, and through forward logistics again to the next point of use. That's what I started calling circular logistics, the holistic view of a product in the center moving from point, away from the point, and to another point. And the reality is right now, the brands, the distributors, the manufacturers, if they're not participating in the circular economy, circular platforms have made it so easy now to match used supply with used demand that customers are going to do it with or without the control of the brands if there's value.
Thank you very much for that response. And it's actually a perfect segue because we can now go into the second pillar of the conversation today. So, Peter, I mean, we've been engaging for a while now, but please do tell us what are circular platforms and how does this play into the whole reverse logistics element?
Sure. So when we think about platforms, they've been around for a long time, but it's really been the advent of the digital economy that's accelerated and expanded their use. So with digital technology, you can now get incredible scale economies. You can also very efficiently match parties. And the vast majority of platforms arose to promote and actually supercharge the linear economy, right? It was about selling, right? And so the vast majority of platforms out there, and we can name platforms like Amazon and Alibaba in China and others, Zalando here in Europe, they became very efficient, right, in being able to get access to customers, help those customers find things very efficiently. And then there's been an explosion of last mile delivery to serve this industry. So that's all about the linear economy. But as Rich has pointed out, a lot of the sales from digital actually get returned. And in fact, digital sales have boosted returns. What did you say, 17%?
17.7
in the US. So that's billions of dollars worth of goods. Many of those goods are just been unboxed. There's nothing wrong with that good. And then it gets sent and considered used. And many companies disregard them. But there's now a wave of policy attention to this problem. And also just consumers are saying this is wasteful. And companies are also beginning to realize, hey, you know, the system isn't sustainable over time. So what we're finding is that these platform business models that have been concentrated on the linear economy, can they be applied to the circular economy? And can we get to some of the same benefits like very efficient matching? Can we get ways of reducing transaction costs? You know, one of the reasons the circular economy kind of struggled a decade ago and others, there's just a lot of friction in the system that makes it difficult for those circular transactions to happen. So what's been interesting is to explore, is that me? It is.
It is.
We're just gonna kill this.
Oh,
Sorry.
It's a new one.
So the what's really interesting is that we know that platform business models are very powerful, right? And they've actually grown to become an integral part of our economies. We all use these. He's not killing us. He won't give up. So they become very powerful business models. The question is can we apply these same business models to circular transactions? And what's exciting is when you start to look, you begin to see circular platforms more often. Sometimes they're an adjunct to an existing platform. So eBay, for example, has a circular component to their platform. They started out being circular and then they went heavy duty into just primary sales. And now they have Amazon, eBay Refurbish, I believe. And then Amazon now has Amazon Renewed. And Alibaba has another one called Nailfish. So we see these platforms emerge, and then there's specialty platforms that are emerging as well that just focus on reverse logistics. There's some in B2B, so there's scrap metal platforms. And I was just explaining to somebody earlier that there's even platforms that will help a construction site that is excavating dirt find a home for that dirt rather than it going to the landfill. So lots of interesting ways in which platform business models can be applied to the circular economy to get those benefits we're looking for, which is scale, efficiency, and ultimately network effects, where the more participants that join, the more value is created, which attracts more participants. So we want that, what they call the flywheel effect, not just for the linear economy, but also for the circular economy.
If I can lean into that, the word circular economy really didn't become known until 2013. In fact, the college course that I just got a master's degree from was founded by the Reverse Logistics Association school in the US, the American Public University Systems. They've got a public school and a military, AMU university. And the Reverse Logistics Association partnered with them to create a course. The course was written in 2013 from research done in the late 90s to early 2000s. And the main textbook that they used was a book that was written in 1999 called Going Backwards, Reverse Logistics Trends and Best Practices, which was ahead of its time, but it was a guide of how to drive returns down. So when I was in this course, and by this time I had built a $1.6 billion a year trade-in program through Verizon, where people could turn in their phones, apply that value towards the next sale. I turned Cisco's global reverse logistics from operating at a cost to implementing programs that gave more benefit back than it cost to run our entire global operation. Had a plant in the Netherlands, Hong Kong, Japan, in the US, 12 places to help me move product across borders. But when I was taking the course and I was talking about driving returns up, I started getting C's in my assignments because the book said to drive returns down. And when I said, well, we need a new book, so I wrote one, endorsed by the Reverse Logistics Association. And through my research, I found that there was over 100 different definitions of the word circular economy. So there's a lack of defined understanding of what it is. Easy to say, tough to do. Over 42% of Fortune 500 companies have publicly stated ESG goals, but there is such a lack of training on how to do it, particularly with reverse, which is the most complex, which is why we need to really press in education. I define the circular economy, and I'm going to steal some of the content from tomorrow's Act Surprise, or Wednesday. Yeah. So Act Surprise, but two of the most successful circular economies that exist on the planet are invisible when you think of circular economy. My definition of a circular economy is movement of product from the first owner to the next, with or without the involvement of who made it. So if you use that as a litmus test, what are the two most successful circular economies that exist? Real estate, because you're not going to recycle your home when you're buying a new home, you're going to sell it. And you'd be crazy to recycle your home unless there was no value for it. The second one's automotive. And if you look at those two industries, there's entire financing options. There's warranty options that are different for a used thing than a new thing. The customers have been conditioned to expect value for their old thing as they're buying the next new thing. And that transitioned to mobility. So in 2010, when I took a look at an opportunity to start buying back devices and applying that value to the next purchase, my Army truck driver brain thought, well, if I can give someone $100 for their old device, and I could use that $100 to sell more things, because I got into this as a marketing director trying to grow market share. Half my life I spent on commission sales. So I got into this and I built the training program to sell more things. So in addition to customers buying more things when they had value for their old product, the same way you would buy a bigger house if you get more money for your old one, or more features on your car if you get more value when you trade it in, like that could work with cell phones. And then in addition to that, when I took in a device and I sent it to the right place, I made more than the $100 that I gave. So it introduced a new revenue stream. By going through and taking back the customer's old device, that drove down my returns because they couldn't go back to what they had. So benefit in return rate. The customers were happy because they got more value and they didn't have to go through and try to figure out how to sell it on eBay or Craigslist or a different place. And the environment won because we kept product out of landfills. Your average cell phone is going to live in the hands of 3 people now before it's at its end of useful life cycle. So the economic values of a circular economy is what drove most places to go through and adopt. And the circular platforms now have made it so much easier to match used supply with used demand. Over 40% of Gen Z and millennials will check the resale value of their clothing before they buy it.
Yep. Just to give you a sense of the scale and the need and opportunity, there are about 330 million phones transacted in secondary markets. But do you know how many phones are actually sold every year? 2 billion. So there's a big gap between the numbers that are actually resold, and a lot of phones are ending up in people's drawers and things. So just like closets now are full of clothing. And so there's just a lot of opportunity in this space. We're, I think, just at beginning stages of really maximizing the potential for platforms to help drive the circular economy.
Yeah, that was one of the key sort of insights for me when I started reading this topic, is that, you don't have to, it's decoupling this environmental degradation with economic growth. You have the option to do both at the same time, right? Which makes it such an interesting and valuable opportunity. So maybe to go a little bit more onto the policy side, you both mentioned the policy aspect a little bit when you were introducing the concepts. But I would like to hear more a little bit about, okay, what do you see ongoing on a policy level? And then maybe we can talk a little bit about what would you like to see on a policy level to really fully leverage the opportunities that arrive through circular platforms and reverse logistics.
Yeah, so if you look around the world, it's actually pretty impressive how many governments have started to adopt circular economy initiatives. Mm-hmm. Some of them are broad vision statements that sort of give direction, and this is part of what governments do. They signal that this is an important area for various stakeholders, be they the academic community, the research community, or businesses themselves. So there you have these big initiatives, and it's around the world. So we're not just talking in Europe, which has been quite active in this area, like with the Green New Deal, but it's also happening in Asia, Japan, Korea, China. All these countries, Singapore, have circular initiatives. Even India now has adopted circular economy initiatives, and even the Middle East. So the United Arab Emirates, the Saudi government has also adopted circular economy. So we can see this as a policy initiative. And then below that, there are very specific rules that are coming in. One is right to repair. And what's interesting, and we haven't touched on this yet, is when you have incentives to resell things and repurchase things, it actually can give new incentives to manufacturers to change how they manufacture things, which is to make it easier to resell. And especially if they can recoup some of that value, then they start getting into. So there's this whole movement around circular redesign and circular design that will actually help promote that. So that's one of the policy initiatives that's out there, which is, so there's a kind of redesign, and then there's this sense that, hey, if I buy something, why can't I repair it? Even if I don't do it myself, I actually hand it to a third party, they should be able to repair. So this whole right to repair movement is actually taking a lot of kind of movement recently, and there have been new legislation just adopted in Europe on this topic. The other is what they call extended producer responsibility laws, and those make an obligation for the manufacturer to take back product. And so these are two big drivers that are beginning to actually penetrate, but it's still a hodgepodge of regulation. And that is actually of concern to companies because they want certainty and they want consistency. It's very difficult to be a large manufacturer and have to have an environment in which you're basically selling different standards into different markets with different conditions. So what that does is actually lead, hopefully, to convergence in governments, increasingly are getting together to have conversations about how do you set up this. The third element, which is interesting, and we could explore further, which is bans on importing garbage and waste. So China banned the imports of plastic. They were the largest importer of used plastics in the world. They abruptly banned that, which sent the whole market globally into a whole adjustment. So that's happening. But there are some interesting trade rules that make it difficult to move. And in some instances, that's a good thing for the circular economy. In other instances, that's actually a big problem because what you want to do in the circular economy is find what is the highest use value for that second use. And sometimes that's not just consuming it inside your own country. It could mean sending it to another country. So if there are these barriers, so interesting how trade issues and how waste has been seen as a negative, just like secondary sales was seen as cannibalization and concern. So I think kind of what would I like to see is kind of a rethink of what it means to go circular and what are the ground rules for trade, what are the ground rules for creating more consistency so that manufacturers can sell their products and incentivize in those areas. So those are a couple of, I think, high level areas that are exciting, but there's still a lot of gaps and a lot of work to do.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that Peter was alluding to is taking used product and putting it into the global secondary market. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Good, better, best in the US is different than good, better, best here in Europe, which is different than good, better, best in South America. Japan has one of the highest tolerances according to the customers because they vote with their wallet of good, better, best. And in the circular economy, customers always vote with their wallet. If you're applying the rules of a linear economy to a circular economy, you start making bad decisions. One of the biggest epiphanies that I had when I worked for Verizon, we had a certified like new product category. Device got returned. We restored it to like new condition and put a like new warranty on it. Removed every scratch imperfection in the device, made it look and feel like new, and we listed them for sale. And customers bought some, but they didn't buy a lot. And the marketing department tapped themselves on the shoulder saying, hey, look, and what a great job we're doing. No one wants used. They just want new. And the reason why is because once you go through and you put that much effort into restoring it, the price point is so close to new that customers will choose new over certified pre-owned in most cases. Gen Z and millennial, that shift is changing. Over 70% are aware of their carbon footprint and are actively taking steps to avoid it. They're willing to pay more to know the impact. But when we were running that program and people weren't buying it, what happened is a $17 billion a year industry grew underneath our feet through circular platforms like eBay, Amazon, neighborhood Facebook pages, where customers were able to go through and sell to each other. The
third-party platforms.
Third-party platforms. So when Peter is talking about, what is considered waste, what I've learned in the circular economy is there's never a bad product, only a bad price. If the cost to reuse is greater than the blended benefit, well, then you should go through and responsibly recycle it. But if the blended benefit is greater than the cost, that is an indication that a product needs to stay within a circular economy, and we need to foster that. One of the biggest areas I think legislation could help would be to establish rules of when a product goes from new to used, to attack directly the waste that is taking place through e-commerce shopping. We need people to think differently about that. If something could be repackaged and reused, if something could be sanitized, and we'll go through some examples in our master's class in circular economy to some of the people that have really figured out good ways to give customer promises that the product looks new, is treated like new, and priced like new, and when to make those decisions in an online shopping. One case study that I have in my book is a company called ACS Fashion in the UK. They go through and they inspect the product to see if it's been introduced to liquid. And if something's been spilled on it or it's been washed, that's when it goes from new to used. Otherwise, it's been superficially handled. They'll go through and they've got a really good ozone cleaning to sanitize it and just to make sure everything smells and looks fresh. The same way it would if you tried on a shirt and left it on a rack and I went through and tried it on right after I made the purchase. That's how people have been buying for years, but we've got to think differently.
But also, I would argue that the secondary market is not necessarily the same as the primary market, right? So there's a whole nother customer segment that's out there that is interested in buying second. And for example, my son loves his phones, he's 15, but I will not buy him a new phone, right? So he is a great candidate for a secondary phone, but he may graduate at some point when he makes money and can buy his own phone. Anyway, so a lot of companies think that they're cannibalizing their primary sales by offering circular when actually you're opening up a completely new market. And that market may not only be domestic, it could be international.
Yeah, I was under a lot of pressure when I started Verizon's trade-in program from a very specific company that may or may not have a fruit in its logo, because they didn't like the cannibalization threat, and it's hard to measure. The secondary market is gray market statistics. Gray market is not illegal. That's a black market. It's not counterfeit. It's just outside the vision of the brand or the manufacturer. So they don't have visibility into the data. That's where the term gray market came. Not illegal, but ethical, outside of control. And the gray market kind of became nebulous. I like to think of it as the green market, when people are able to go through and transact to each other in a way that's safe for the environment and safe and economically beneficial. The green market really is the term, not the gray market. But when companies lose sight of the gray market information, fear takes over logic because it's hard to put numbers around it. So when Apple was coming saying, this is cannibalizing our product, one of the only reasons why they can charge $1,500 for a new device now is because the old one's still worth $8,000. And every year when they come up with a new phone that has more bells and whistles and a higher price tag, that makes the secondary market for it grow and greater. I've got a reuse case that we'll go through and explore in the master's class, where I show a mobile carrier in the island of Aruba with people lined up out the door and down the block like they were auditioning for American Idol in 2016 to line up for the latest device that was getting ready to launch. That device in the island was the iPhone 4S. When the iPhone 7 was getting ready to launch all over the world, but Apple didn't have anyone on that island. And the reality was none of those customers were going to go through and buy the iPhone 7. It was too much. But when demand rose for the 4S, I had to pay more to get customers to turn it in. When I gave the customers more money for their old device, they spent more money in my store to buy the next new device. And then the next year, when the new phone came out, there was a hungry market for the iPhone 5. So you built a market for what I call customer 2, customer 3, customer 4. What separated Apple, because I'll even talk about this, Tim Cook in 2019, about 9 years after Verizon launched the trade-in program, Tim Cook wrote a letter to investors over a revenue target miss, stating that how he was going to right-size the market was to make it easy for customers to trade in their old device, because not only did that device act as a subsidy towards the next new device, and it was great for the environment, it also grew Apple's install base. And if you go through and you look from a legislation standpoint, the iTunes platform, where when Peter gives his phone to a son or sells his phone online and someone else buys it to give it to their child or use it themselves, Apple has a way that you have to go through and say, I have this device now. You put in your credit card, and Apple makes about 30 cents on the dollar for anything that you buy on your device. So you download a $10 package in Aruba, Apple make the same 30 cents as if you were to download the same $10 package here in Barcelona.
Right. So you're growing your installed base for your ecosystem.
Yeah.
So there's an ecosystem play, which is really interesting that a lot of people don't think about. And when you have product line managers that are just measured on sales, they kind of tend to neglect and forget about the broader ecosystem benefits. So you also have to rethink your KPIs and what you measure your managers on when you go to circular outcomes.
Right. Which is a good segue into reverse logistics, because if you look at forward sales, everything that you make is in new condition and it's easily packaged and easy to automate. And your entire sales force, more often than not, is aligned to sell that product to the first customer and try to get that customer to upgrade to the next product as fast as they possibly can.
Right. And I just add, they all have a common SKU.
Right.
But when you go to circular, what happens?
So one of the elements of reverse logistics, one of the functions that you have to have is you have to assess, number one, you have to match the order and give the customer the right credit. Then you've got to assess cosmetic and functional composition. Think of buying a car. You say, hey, I've got a 2015 Dodge Ram. How much would you pay for it? It's an entirely different conversation than if you can see pictures of it. It's classified as excellent. It's got a Carfax and it's got a health report with 15,000 miles in the odometer. you would go through and pay more for that than one that has more wear and tear, some love and imperfection, but assessing cosmetic and functional impacts the price. So if there's one water bottle or one laptop in new condition, the minute you take that and you start creating good, better, best, like new, that one SKU can become 5 SKUs. And then how do you manage those? What
So
classifies
they each
good, better,
become
best?
unique. Well, that's the thing that I've kind of learned is when you move to the circular economy, every product becomes unique and you have to evaluate it, grade it. And this is where platforms come in, because platforms are good at standardizing. They're good at, if they're successful, they're good at building trust with the consumer. They're also good at embedding additional services like, guarantees, like insurance, other types of value that gives the buyer confidence that they're going to the right place. So what's interesting is that you'll have different grading systems, but also different ways of ensuring that confidence in your buyers. And the better that a platform can do that, the more likely they're going to create these network effects.
Correct. If you take a look at the U.S. economy, because I know those statistics, and I'll zoom out to global in a second. The National Retail Federation just published a study. The U.S. retail economy was $5.13 trillion. The impact of unwanted returns that came back was north of $750 billion. So for every $1 billion in sales, $144 million was given back to customers through return programs. Unwanted return, 1999 books still apply. You want to try to drive those down. But the value of the secondary market has been growing sequentially year over year. Great market data. The only study I was able to find that really resonated was one that was done by Dr. Rogers and Dr. Rogers, where they went through and did a bunch of independent research through players in the secondary market. It's trending north of 700 billion right now. So if you go through and you take the value of unwanted return, 750 billion, that you want to drive down through reverse logistics processes, and the benefit of the secondary market, over 700 billion, that you want to drive up through reverse logistics to get them ready for the next customers, you have roughly 29% of a $5.13 trillion a year economy that is impacted by reverse with no education on it. Allied Market Research just did a study last week that the global market cap for reverse logistics companies is about $630 billion today, in 2022, forecasted to grow to $947 billion by the year 2032. Why? The European Union last month, what was it, 584-3 voted for right for repair, which is going to go through reverse. Yep. The online returns are continuing to grow. Actually, Asia has the fastest growing rate in reverse logistics impact. But the business need, the economic opportunity, and the shift in how people are shopping needs a rapid response.
Not only this is just the retail sector of the economy. As we know, we're going through this major transition from a fossil-based economy to a more renewable, clean energy economy. And over time, those assets that you deploy to have cleaner energy are going to reach their end of life. And so there are currently no platforms in this space, but when we look out into the future, we know that there are going to be millions of solar panels that are going to need to be removed, decommissioned, and replaced. Wind turbines as well. I just learned last week that 15% of the installed base of wind power projects in the US for GE are now going through repowering. So they're taking those blades down and also refurbishing the gearboxes and repowering those sites. The same thing is also going to happen for EV batteries for vehicles. We're going to be deploying millions of cars that are electric in the future, and they have a set life of between 8 to 12 years. And so those batteries are going to come onto the market. The question is, what's going to happen to them? These are areas where We know that there's going to be a need in the future, but efficient platforms or circular platforms to match the buyers and sellers in the secondary markets don't exist. But so that means that there's really interesting opportunity to establish those marketplaces and leverage the learnings that we've gotten from things like phones. You'd have to adapt them to some degree, but some of the core principles are already established.
I was speaking in the Netherlands in September, and for a group, Eustace from the Next E-commerce Supply Chain Hub is going to be here. He's going to be on my panel on Wednesday. And when we were in that room, it's been a long time since I've been in a room with that many CEOs. And we were going through and talking about how to build an integrated end-to-end supply chain with tech. Really cool stuff the Next E-commerce Supply Chain Hub has going on. But one of the panels, there was a gentleman, he was early in career, but he had engineered a solution to go through and maximize battery charging stations for transit. But he was part of the panel, and the moderator asked him, when you go grocery shop, and I asked the group, when you go grocery shop, what are the things that you're looking for? And he mentioned that he would like to see the carbon footprint for the vegetables or the groceries he was buying, because he was willing to pay more to go through and minimize harm to the environment. And you could hear the audible eyes rolling from all these execs that were thinking, that's stupid. No one would ever want that. But if you face reality as it is, not as it was and not as you want it to be, the leaders of this world right now, the leaders in corporations right now, their generation would not want to buy something used. There was a stigma with it. But if you look at, Gen X right now is the #1 spending demographic. It will be millennials in 5 to 10 years, and you have to meet them where they are. There's an emerging concept called product as a service, where you can go through and use the same product more than once. It's one of the things that ACS is doing. If a product goes from new to used, they won't just sell it. They'll try to go through and do it on a subscription. Use a shirt for a month. You want your winter wardrobe, great, send it back. And they're able to go through and reuse the product. So you think,
I just agree with that and say that when you go circular, it actually changes the business model, right? And instead of just selling something and you're done with it, which also includes all the externalities associated with that product, suddenly with reverse, either because your clients are demanding it or your regulators are forcing you to do it, regardless of the reason, they're going to have to think about taking these things back. And then suddenly leasing models actually become more attractive to companies. So you can see some of the big OEMs, when they think about the value of a vehicle, batteries are going to have still value even after that car can't be really used because of the range issues, but you could repurpose it and sell it to a utility who can be using it for backup storage and stationary applications. And the OEM, if they still own that battery, would be able to lease it to the utility. So I think what's interesting is really dig into this topic. The implications are broader and more interesting and transformative than many think. And so I think that's why the United Nations ECE is interested in it, because they're interested in transformative innovation and what it means and how do we achieve that.
Yeah, if I could submit, part of what I talk about in the book, Going Circular, the evolution of reverse logistics into a competitive weapon, is about government involvement. Internalization is when companies go through and take on responsibility and costs for their environmental impact. Forced internalization is when governments make you do that. Right to repair, making companies move away from introducing forced obsolescence is an example of forced internalization. But if you want to use the carrot and not the stick, one of the ways that governments can tip their fingers on the scale of single use versus multi-use is through tax benefits. Mm-hmm. And if you go through and you tax less on something going from customer 1 to customer 2 than taxing on the new product to promote the reuse, I'm a big fan of creating digital passports, QR codes that can go through and capture the history of a product and can measure how often it goes from one user to the next, or re-registration platforms like iTunes. But if there's incentives or breaks for companies that can prove the re-registration, I think those are a few things that could go a long way in a short period of time.
And in fact, it may make more sense to forego some tax revenue on the secondary sale, because governments are paying for this in landfill costs and other externalities to the air, ocean, all these areas. And so I think we need to rethink policy in some respects of why do we have double taxation? When you have a primary sale that's taxed, why is that secondary sale taxed at the same rate? If you're trying to promote reuse and you're trying to promote reusing, this actually creates a disincentive for resale. But it doesn't mean there's no free lunch, as they say. It doesn't mean governments aren't paying for that cost. And so rethinking some of that, I think there's a lot of potential benefit from a broader social and economic standpoint.
Exactly. You mentioned we need this more systemic view, right? So what is going on in the various areas, and how also do they interplay with each other, right? How some incentives can actually be detrimental in other areas. So looking from a broader perspective. Looking at the time and given our format, I would like to invite those in the room, but also those online, to comment, reflect, ask any questions. Maybe while we're waiting for some ideas to pop up, you could quickly sort of tell us about what we can expect on Thursday at your masterclass, because we've heard already some snippets. But
yeah, no, we're super excited to collaborate together. We met, 6 months ago or so, and just through an exchange, and we're both passionate about this topic, and I learned a ton about reverse logistics, and
I learned a ton about circular platforms.
There you go. So we have put together a masterclass that we're teaching on Thursday. It's a full day, and it's going to walk through in detail some of the things that we've talked about kind of at a high level today, and hopefully give you both a deeper understanding of what the potential is, and come away with an appreciation for both the complexity, but also tremendous opportunity to expand circular, both logistics and platform opportunities.
When I was at that seminar, because I gave 900 copies of the book away to the Reverse Logistics Association in Vegas this year. I'm giving 100 away in Amsterdam when we have the annual RLA event in June. The reason why is because no company I've seen, and I've worked for a distributor of things, Verizon, a maker of things, Cisco, a maker of different things. I hunted for any training curriculum I could give to my employees to say, this is what you do when they get pulled in from different parts of the business. Because right now, no one's choosing to go into reverse logistics. No one knows what it is. But I want to make circular logistics a word. I want to make it interesting. And once people know what it is I do for a living, it's very easy to find employees that want to be a part of it. But at that event, I asked people, raise your hand if you've ever taken a supply chain or management course. Hands went up. Keep them up if you've ever taken a course on reverse. One hand went up. And we had representation from all industries. Fashion, home goods, apparel, part manufacturers, 3PLs that help move things. So raise your hand if you've got a corporate training program that you are using to train your new employees what reverse logistics is when they come on. And there was nothing. So the book, this platform, is not because either one of us are the smartest people that are out there, but it's because there is a really big need. And I hope that we can introduce a conversation that can get some force behind it with the next generation of thinkers that will take this and not wait 25 years to write the next book. There needs to be one next year and the year after that, especially with AI and ML now impacting our ability to go through and match use, supply, use, demand, predict when things are going to fall and fail.
Yeah, I would just add to that, there's actually a lot of exciting technology innovation that's happening in this space that was not, just 10 years ago. So tracing technology is happening, computer vision, so that you can quickly scan this. So all of these things are reducing the amount of friction that's involved. And so it's going to make circular actually more accessible, lower cost, and scalable.
Excellent. And I hope that today's conversation is even more allows you to be even more interested in the topic and hopefully attend also on Thursday. So I think, do we have some questions? Yes, I think you were first. Please go ahead.
I have 2 questions online as well.
Yeah. Well,
So thank you so much. Super interesting and definitely an incentive to join on Thursday. I think there's, like you said, a lot of regulation, especially I think the EU is maybe a bit ahead of the game. And then of course the US jumped right into it with some new policies that have recently been announced, as well as tax rebates align with what France is doing. And then there's also very much a kind of a latent responsibility on the corporations to find solutions because they're going to have to meet these policies. I'd love to hear a little bit about your perspective on systemic change because, big brands can change the world, yes, but the consumers have to follow in suit with those changes. And I think, you mentioned a little bit the Gen Zs and sort of their perspective on consumer rental or usage with the buyback price, but there's a mentality shift that has to happen here. And unfortunately, there's a huge amount of product that's already existing in the market that's not being purchased new that needs to come out of the closets and into the circulation of the circular economy. So I'd just love to hear what your perspective is on sort of how we complete that circle with the regulation, the corporations that really are responsible for making the change in the industries that they operate in, and then how we're going to kind of incentivize and include the consumers in the process.
Yeah, so I would actually point to what's happening in the B2B space, which is pretty interesting. So there's a consumer side, and you've mentioned that, Rich, but there's also a lot of activity happening between companies that recognize there's opportunities for one company to take the output of another company or industry's output. And platforms, again, are making those connections possible in ways. And I'll give you just some simple examples. One is office furniture, right? People don't think about it, but there's actually a lot of office furniture in cities around the world. And when one company is moving into a city and another is leaving, there's huge opportunities to have them exchange and one buy the output of the other. But it's hard for them to find each other, right? If you're in the insurance industry, what do you know about somebody from the chemical industry? And so these matching platforms are happening more and more on the B2B side. So I'm actually excited and optimistic about businesses recognizing the value because, they need. The other thing that's important is a change in procurement software. The vast majority of companies around the world buy using procurement software. And traditionally, this software only showed you new items, not the corresponding older items. And think about when you go to buy a book from Amazon. They will actually show you the price of the new book, but right next to it, they will show you what a used book. We should have that for every product that exists. And if you had that, then procurement folks, now there's rules about what you can buy and what you can't buy, but at least they would see it. And adding into what you mentioned earlier, which is the ESG elements, where you could see the carbon footprint. And so the carbon footprint of a new product typically, almost always, is more than the carbon footprint of a secondary item. So if companies are trying to find where they can squeeze carbon opportunities that are tangible and actually measurable, rather than planting trees in Bolivia, which sounds nice in theory, but it's very difficult to actually measure that. Out of your supply chain, you can really measure that. So what I'm excited is these circular platforms are going to be not only B2C, but also B2B, and they're going to add these other dimensions, which are going to add new value, and they're going to be able to send you a report and say, you purchased this amount, and this was the carbon footprint associated with that. So this stuff is happening right now, and it's just going to expand over the next few years, which is just going to open up this whole space. So I'm actually super bullish in terms of the impact of circular platforms in the B2B space.
The one other thing I would add, putting my half of my life I spent on commission sales. I got into this as a marketing director. There's a phrase, what gets measured gets done. Starting to see some, I call them digital passports, QR codes that are sewn onto on the clothing or installed on material. And if the circular marketplaces would require the scanning of a QR code, a centralized database that said this was made on this date, and this was sold on a circular marketplace on this date, well, now you can start measuring the impact of what's going from customer one to customer two. Now you can start going through and holding to task the manufacturers who are overproducing single-use items. If you can't go through and measure the amount of time it's been used or used as product as a service. But I do think that the marketplaces, combined with some legislative efforts, could require a digital passport that would give us the intelligence we really need to go through and make this work.
Yeah, so I'll make one other point, which is you have high volume, low value products like plastics. Those are really tough to create marketplaces because you have to fund the marketplace. And when there's very little value, there isn't much for the marketplace to be able to capture that value. On the other extreme, you have very high value items but small number of transactions, and things like airplanes. You know, if you're interested in doing weekend flying, there's actually marketplaces where you can buy planes. There's marketplaces for yachts. There's marketplaces for rare books. Those actually function well. They're commercially viable. It's really this middle zone that we've been talking about where the electronics is huge. There's millions and millions of electronics produced, 2 billion phones. I think, 100 million laptops a year. So these are huge markets. Creating circular marketplaces in those spaces are a rich area. Apparel is another one. So what's exciting, and as Rich pointed out, there's already well-established circular marketplaces for automobiles. It's $1 trillion market globally, and we don't think of that as circular economy, but the reality is it is. But there are these new spaces that are emerging, and again, I think it's a combination of regulation, but also technology and then changing consumer sentiment and need to take better attention to climate and carbon footprint. All of these forces are coming into bear, so we're just going to see more and more circular marketplaces grow in the future.
Yeah, one last thing, and then we'll jump over. Sorry. On Wednesday, you're going to meet one of my friends, Ben Whitaker. He helped develop a trade-in program for Decathlon. So if you think about circular,
so explain Decathlon. What does Decathlon do?
They're a sporting goods shop. So what he did is he helped engineer a catalog that was similar to the trading catalog that I did for mobility, where you could bring in a badminton racket, and they could tell you after assessing a couple questions of how does it look, how does it function, what the residual value of that badminton racket is, and then you use that badminton racket as a form of payment for your next thing. So if it can transcend into clothing, sporting goods, the internet has made the cost to recirculate a whole lot less than it's ever been. So you're seeing more product categories fall below that line.
Yep.
Sorry.
Actually, I have two reactions and one question. So reaction to Decathlon, they actually have a very cool also offer regarding sport as a service. So they actually have like it for now only in France, but they have basically depending on the size of your family, you can just come and rent the sporting equipment so that your kid can do karate on the first week and then badminton if he wishes to, so you don't have to buy everything. But they have the advantage of being also the manufacturer, so they're not only the distributor. So this offer is available only on their own products. For the carbon footprint on the secondary market, I think that what is really tricky now, because this is part of the issue that we're trying to address now with Harvard University, is the calculation methods regarding the usage. So there's a chance, hopefully, in digital passports, but we'll see how it goes because it needs to be super fluent so that user actually put in the information regarding the fact how this tool has actually been used, so that we can take into consideration the overall carbon footprint of a secondary market, which is very, very tricky because we don't know how to do it already correctly on the very simple.
We know, I mean, you see it more and more on transportation. So when you go to buy an airline ticket, they can calculate pretty easily what the carbon footprint is. Also, product companies are showing calculators for transportation and carbon footprint and giving you options. Really what you want to give is consumer options regarding what they use. But there's other areas where it's super difficult to come up with a carbon footprint.
Yeah, again, like the airline, for example, they're taking into consideration the usage only, so not necessarily the scope 3 entirely. So again, this is a tricky topic. Yeah. But I actually have a question regarding the reverse logistics that you've mentioned, because one of the trickiest topics that we have when we're talking about this in our space, let's say, is the fact that the logistics is very low margin business. And actually, like I've been talking to Amazon France, and they said that for them, this straight line logistics, like typical logistics, the cost per parcel for logistic operation is 70 cents, and reverse logistics is 16 euros. So the costs are like astronomical and incomparable. So for them to be able to correctly treat the reverse parcel and reintroduce it into the market, it is just like exploding in terms of cost-wise. So maybe you had some better examples.
No, and what you are talking about is a real need to go through and increase the education, because what you have is such a variety of execution from company to company, facility to facility. Every brand or manufacturer will put in their own rules. Like I said, it's streamlined to go to the customer, but the return rules of what can come back is muted. If you need to go through and repackage something, that could add to the cost. But if you compare that to the cost to make new, you're looking at just a piece of the pie, but not looking at the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So right now there's a varying degree of execution from place to place. And I do think some of the technology that Peter was talking about that we'll go into on Thursday with auto sortation, image capture, grading, the ability to go through and repackage or regenerate package or purchase additional packaging. You'll be surprised when we go through and do a grading exercise on how much stuff is devalued just due to cardboard or shrink wrap. But assessing how does it look, how does it function, is something that needs to get trained. It's something that needs to get reinforced with rules and legislation from consumer protection companies. It needs a real rethink. But if we intentionally try to optimize 30% of what reverse logistics can do to positively impact a business, I think education would go a long way.
Just if I can follow up on this, if we're talking about the company that is not owned, let's say, its own supply chains, in terms of like they're only manufacturers and they do not actually control logistics, or on the contrary, Amazon that doesn't produce but is only responsible for logistics, how can you actually, I understand that you need to work in an ecosystem kind of way,
Yeah.
and acknowledge that your partners keep in the line, but still like being able to retry the product, resend it, recondition it, and like all of those are individual operations, as you mentioned, like every product become individual products. So,
well, I'm going to be looking at a couple of container ships of products in the U.S. in about 2 weeks that were manufactured, imported into Europe, sold, returned, and then they had to export them out to go back to the U.S. and likely they would get destroyed if there was no value, just because there wasn't processes or rules. So when you add in all those steps, it ticks up. You say, well, now I've got to take this stuff, I've got to ship it to a different place, I've got to pay 2 people to receive, the one that got the return in the first place and the one that goes to second place. Those numbers can add up. But if you go through and you do something like a smart logistics facility, if you can go through and give the customer the guarantee, or the brand, because brands have different care abouts than distributors, that something is still new. If you can send things to a specialized return center that can assess functional and cosmetic, a lot of the stuff that comes back is still in new condition. If you could reuse that as new and then have the next order drop from the new stock, those costs could get cut by multiples.
Yeah, and just imagine, I mean, Amazon is chock full of incredibly smart people focused on optimizing the sale of linear, right? Not circular. Can you imagine if a company like Amazon redirected even a quarter of those resources into optimizing circular? I think we would see tremendous cost reductions.
They always put the long-haired furry guy, and got his degrees online over reverse. You know, most companies will take their best talent and put it towards their biggest problem, which is normally driving new sales. But Peter's right. It is going to take a talent push with smart engineers to go through and get it done. I had visits from when I was at my 2 Fortune 50 companies, every major consultant firm that was out there. I'm not going to name them, but no one brought a single expert that had done reverse logistics before.
Yeah. I was just in Germany at the Hanover Fair, and I was excited to see the amount of automation that's now being deployed. These are pilot projects. They're being done by the technical universities, so this hasn't been embedded yet into the companies, but they're looking at ways of disassembling products using robots and things. So I think there's just a lot of experimentation that's just beginning, and we're going to see breakthroughs in reducing the cost of logistics across the entire spectrum. Yeah.
And to comment on that, I think it really boils down to the incentives, like you said. The talent is there, the people are there, but if there is, and you can always find out the reason behind 16 euros because they just chose this piece to justify why not do it, because it boils down to the incentive. They don't see the benefit of it. Why, right? And that's why I'm going to go a little bit off about the regulations. You've been showing your phone for a long time. I mean, 30 years ago, I had my first Nokia, which was, if it broke, it was all modular. You just take that piece, you fix it, and the lifespan was super long. And of course, we're talking now about, the reuse and the second life, but it's also about extending the initial life. Sure. So now, of course, Apple didn't have any incentive because it was all about, you couldn't break anything about. And I love the regulation in that sense of the right to repair, because I hope that the modularity comes in back somehow, of course, because the companies are never, not going to have enough incentives to modularize, to change the entire design process, to make it modular in such a way that you first extend to life as much as you can. Then you start doing the second life. And that extending life focus has not been there because everything is designed now to break in the next 18 months. Whereas the good old Nokia 30 years ago, I got a car driven over by mine and it cost me €5 to change the microphone, So but that's the part that, of course, you need reverse logistics, you need logistics, you need everything for that operation as well. But I think that's an extra regulation and incentive because it all boils down to the incentive, right?
An interesting example, because I've been using the iPhone for a couple of years, and every single time they release a new iPhone version, my phone gets slower. Yeah. And it's not a coincidence anymore, I think. No. This has happened several generations. Yes, please.
Can I just add to iPhone topic? I'm founder of one startup which is renting gadgets. And we had from the latest model of iPhone to probably 2-3 different old generation. Besides all problems which were mentioned here, the biggest one is the manufacturers, specifically Apple, didn't provide the parts for the new generation. So even if we are owners and we are renting them to our customers, something happened bad, we cannot repair by ourselves. So we are like locked.
Yeah, so this is one way to make it look better, but still they could do it completely differently by just doing some modularity in that.
Well, we were just in Brussels and Lenovo was there. They're the largest producer of laptops in the world. And they actually came out and said that they are actually redesigning their laptops to make them easier to repair. So I agree with you that in the past, hopefully in the future, we're going to see these redesigns come in that make it easier to repair. And I know it's across the board. John Deere, for example, made black boxes that was very difficult for farmers to repair their own tractors, which they have a long legacy of doing. Even EV cars now are difficult to repair. You can't go in and fix them very easily. So I think, this right to repair could have a positive impact on circular.
We have some questions online.
Sure.
Carlos Beltran, maybe you would like to unmute and show your video and ask your question. If not, we can ask it for you. Unless he's still online.
Yes.
Okay, then we'll just read it. So I think, quoting what someone said, there's just a lot of friction in the system that makes it difficult for those circular transactions to happen. Could our money be our money codependence? We need alternative exchange systems.
Well, I think that's what a platform tries to do, right, is become that mode of exchange. And it's interesting, we just talked about Decathlon. That's what I call going circular alone, where an individual brand decides that it wants to drive a circular program, and it does it within its own production, with its own products. But there's this other, what I call going circular together, where an industry gets together or multiple industries get together on a common platform, and they're able to do an exchange together. And both models have their reasons and benefits, but it's ultimately around how do you exchange value, right? And exchanging that value has a lot of elements, right? The grading things that you were speaking about, the insurance, the trust, and things. And that's why I'm excited about the potential for platforms to play in this space, because they're able to create these additional, what I call circular services that don't exist in the general economy, right? Because the platform is incentivized, if it can generate enough revenue, to offer these services, to build that trust and support transactions. We need transactions that are circular, right? Not just circular economy in the vague sense. We need people trading these types of goods and moving them around the economy just as much as first sale, secondary sale, so that we fully leverage. Maybe you're familiar with the what they call the circularity gap report. There are about 100 million tons of material that are extracted from the earth every year. And the calculations are that only about 7% of that is actually reused. And we're going backwards. It used to be 9%. So I tell you, the potential and the need for more circularity is phenomenal, especially as we go from 8 billion to 9 billion people in just 14 years. So we know when we look out into the future, the material consumption is on an upward trajectory. The question is how do we use the material that we extract so that you can get fully circular? So I'll just add one more little data point that I thought was very interesting. There's a major battery manufacturer in China that has become the largest battery manufacturer for electric vehicles. It's called CALT. The CEO and founder of that company was in Davos in January, and he said that China will become fully circular, will not need any new material for batteries by 2042. That's 18 years from now. And every expectation is that China's demand for electric vehicles is going to grow. Their ability to become fully circular for battery materials is pretty stunning. And, if countries go that way, it has huge implications both for competition, also for the mining industry and things like that. So anyway, so there's a lot of attention in the space, and I think reverse logistics and platforms are going to be a critical part of that future.
Reverse logistics in Asia, according to the Allied Market Research, is growing at over 6 and change
percent a year.
Percent per year, compared to 4%, which is what the reverse logistics space is going.
So it's faster
they must have made it profitable.
Yeah.
Knowing the Chinese,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's true. They must have made it profitable.
Yeah. So, well, that means it's growing faster than GDP, which is what we need.
One of the things that we'll talk about in the master's class is linear finance versus circular finance. And when Peter was talking about procurement being different, when you're buying new and you're buying things that are in new condition, that is entirely different than the skill set needed to go through and buy things in good, better, best at market price, where the supply of the secondary market can go through and change things rapidly. If one carrier goes through and dumps a whole bunch of phones on the market and drops the price that you just bought in an auction, well, then you're holding a bag. So part of it is the skill set for circular procurement and parts procurement that needs to get expanded on. The other thing in a traditional linear sales, make, use, dispose, is linear finance. All returns are bad. But my biggest barriers for Verizon and Cisco was implementing mechanisms to go through and use the customer's equipment as a form of payment. Mm-hmm. When I did the first trade-in program, I wanted the cost to be subtracted from what they were buying, and we just collect the net. Mm. But we didn't want to invest in systems until we knew the pilot worked. We didn't want to discount because discounting was a negative finance metric. We didn't want to issue credits because credit was a negative finance metric. So plan F was, well, we'll let this company that wanted to buy them, our reps will go through, issue a gift card, apply that gift card towards the point of sale, because that counted as payment, didn't impact any financial metrics. And that's how we went through and did the first pilot by gift cards being the form of payment and the collection of the device to get sent to to a spot. No different than collecting cash in a store and sending it to the bank. It's actually easier to collect the device and send it to the spot if you engineer a smart process, which we did. But what I like about Decathlon and what you'll hear from Ben is they have a way to go through, take back something, assess it, and use it, the old thing, as a form of payment, the same way you would if you drove your car into a lot, traded in. And
right. And then there's interesting business models like Goodwill in the US. They take gifts, as kind of charity, and then they resell, and they are able to capture the margin on the resale. Yeah. So what's interesting, and I think is going to emerge, is all these different tiers, right? Goodwill tends to be kind of the bottom of the barrel stuff, but there's still value in there, and there's a very active market for products that Goodwill sells, and people do give away their high-end products to them. So they have, what is it, Superdry and Off-White and Louis Vuitton stuff, and they capture a bigger margin on those, so they like to and actually incentivize people to gift them. So some companies are actually allowing donations as part of their circular strategy as well.
Thank you. We have more questions, actually. So Stephanie, you've raised your hand. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Hi, I'm Stephanie from Germany. I'm owner of a startup. So I'm thinking about reverse logistics because I didn't make so much thoughts about that. But the reverse logistics, is it only a topic for the B2C market? Because there's a big, is it also B2B? Do you have some examples for that?
Well, Cisco is primarily a business-to-business organization. They sold business to business to consumer. And, anytime you offer a customer promise of you could try it and return it, or there's a warranty on it, you've got a reverse logistics challenge that you have to solve. Anyone that buys something from you with a promise that you'll take care of it is dealing with reverse logistics in the negative way. The progressive companies that are trying to go through and recapture that value and apply it towards the next one, or in the case of the Cisco pledge, Chuck, Cisco CEO made a pledge at the World Economic Forum in Davos in 2018 that Cisco would take back 100% of customers' used gear from anyone, anywhere in the world at no charge, which is a bold thing. And I got to run that pledge. I know we did that because I ran the team. We never said no to anyone wanting to pick it up. But to answer your question, businesses that sell to businesses with those promises have the same problems, my experience, and that business to consumers have. Yeah, it's just different value and velocity, how many you get back. And
yeah, I'll give you an example of one that was just recently announced. The GSMA, which is the Association for Telecommunications Companies, they have their huge World Mobile Congress here in Barcelona.
And they're coming here tomorrow?
Yeah, they are coming to our conference, yes. They announced a B2B marketplace for used kind of telecommunications equipment. So you can imagine Deutsche Telekom, for example, is refurbishing towers for cell phones. There will be equipment there. They're going to be able to put this on a marketplace where other telecommunication companies can buy that. So we're seeing this more and more, actually, of companies. And what's interesting about that one is it's the trade association that's sponsoring this. So some trade associations are, and this goes back to my point about going circular alone versus going circular together. You don't always have to try to force a company to take back its own equipment. There may be other companies out there that would love to have that. You can imagine, probably the standards that Deutsche Telekom sets for renewing its equipment out in the field is probably pretty stringent. So they may just be out in the field for 5 years. That equipment still probably has another 5 to 10 years left in it. Another telecommunication company around the world would be very interested in buying it.
Yeah, I mean, as companies are migrating their 4G equipment to 5G, that 4G equipment can still be used in different parts of the world. Yep. Africa, for instance, is predominantly a 3G country, and if you can go through and match that supply there. I was just chatting with a company that was trying to figure out what to do with the generators, because 5G consumes less power than 4G does. So the generators that they needed were smaller, no longer required. So what do you do with these big generators, and how do you go through and match the sale of those? And I saw a really cool platform from RGX Recycling that's being built to go through and enable generator sales to go through. Yeah. But the B2B world is harder, because if you're trying to decommission an Amazon server farm, that has an entirely different market impact than going through and upgrading the server for a small call center, if you will.
I have to say that it's interesting what you mentioned, because I know many startups that have started as B2B. It's the B2C and then changed to B2B. Oh. So I have a different idea about it. But Stephanie, I would check a few companies from Europe that are more in the startup phase. So, for example, Norm, they're a Swedish company, and they provide, you mentioned the product as a service, so they provide office furniture as a service. So they just give you the furniture, you can rent it, and then they can give it to other companies. Then another one, which is in Finland, I would check also, they provide floor as a service. So they can take the old floor, put it in a new place, and they work only with businesses. And there is another one, which is, I think is in Germany, Signify. They work with Philips. They provide light as a service. So again, they come, take all the light bulbs, put in another place, and yeah. So a lot of reverse logistics
there's
there.
Some in the oil and gas space as well. So yeah, I think B2B is quite active.
I'm that's very interesting, because we plan to don't sell batteries. We will rent it and then take it back, and this is reverse logistics. So I didn't know that this is the name for that, what we are planning. So that's cool. Thank you.
We had the same epiphany.
Actually, it's circular logistics.
Yeah. You can put it on the investor that can raise a lot of funding.
Yeah, circular logistics sounds a lot more attractive.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your question, Stephanie. We have another question online from Barry. Barry, would you be able to unmute yourself and turn on your video to ask the question? If not, I'm happy to read it out. Okay. Then I will ask again. Okay, I'll ask for you. So Barry's question, you haven't discussed overproduction. Shouldn't we be looking to circularity as a way to reduce the take side of the linear economy?
Yeah, I think that's one of the positive spillover effects. If you can get these phones and other products to have a second life, you reduce the need for first life. So I think it's embedded in reducing primary consumption as well, and making sure that the products that we do produce are fully utilized.
Yeah, and there's a cultural aspect. Like in Japan, things don't get returned. People don't buy and return the way they do in other parts of the world. But I do see two ways to impact the overproduction. Number one is sales policies change really fast when customers change the way they shop during COVID. Free shipping, free online returns, all those things were reactionary to try to get people to buy during a hyper-competitive, alarming time in our world's history. But I do think that some of those policies need to get relooked at, and some are getting relooked at. Some new technology is coming out where they're identifying patterns of return behavior. You're buying 3 of the same thing in different sizes. So instead of fulfilling the order, do you want to go through and they'll pause it and have someone reach out to that one person because they have high deciles of wanting to return. The other thing is, if you go through and you allow things that can be reused as new to be reused as new, there's an alarming amount of perfectly good product that's getting discarded or sold at a loss with the new purchase order coming in right behind it. And if you have a smart integrated logistics system that can take your stuff that goes to a return processing capable center and fulfilling the next new order with something that's still in condition without repurchasing, there's a lot of repurchasing when there's perfectly good product that's out there.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on this question in regards to the example of Chinese electric vehicle policy, because are we asking the wrong question? Because if they still have 18 years to become fully circular in electric vehicles, maybe they should review first the mobility itself instead of making sure that every Chinese family have 2 cars as we do have. So maybe it's a question not about the volume of the cars and whether they're electrical or not, but whether it's a question of mobility rather. So just
yeah, and I think product as a service that we had talked about a couple times is another way to go through, in addition to responsible thinking, which I think is what you're saying, where they're like, well, I don't need 2 cars.
I mean, like for some product, of course, the circularity is the answer, but from others, maybe we should instead ask for the actual purpose of use. So even use it. Product as a service is not always an answer. Typically in China, again, there have been this kind of bike renting services that we know very well in Europe, but it was not adopted at all. So the result of it is just like a massive amount of bikes which are they found themselves in the landfill. So maybe there's like, even again, if we're asking ourselves what are the profound reasons for us to think about circularity, and this is the problem, what do we do with all this matter that we have and very little that is still in the ground, maybe we should ask for the functioning itself. So that's at least for some products, I guess.
Yeah,
this would have to be regulation at the end of the day.
Part of it, yes, but also I think that there is a question on the individual side as well. So because we can reduce the demand or we can reduce the usage, so there is still a power in each of us to say that, like, I don't need a car, so I can just, like, I don't know, take a bus. But I do need to have a really good bus services, so there is a need of the whole ecosystem response to it as well.
I think the next generation is going to force that in how they choose to buy and what products they get under what terms. I think that's going to happen quickly.
I read today a great quote. I'm sorry, I don't remember who said it, but that the greenest product is the one you have already.
Yeah.
That's
Specifically, on consumer behaviors. You talked about Gen Z being more sustainability oriented, willing to pay more for used goods, and you're talking about that being a value-based purchasing behavior. And I believe you, but I have no way to reconcile that idea with the explosion of ultra-fast, cheap marketplaces like Shine and Temu that are pumping out cheap new goods that are practically disposable in enormous volumes. And these marketplaces are growing faster than any of these virtuous resellers that I try to frequent. And so there's a disconnect there.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking now a little bit ahead to digital product passports that are on the horizon in Europe. I'm very, very excited about this kind of end-to-end transparency, traceability, authenticity, but also to know exactly what is going to happen at the end of life of that product. And it's potentially a place for government intervention or nudge that these producers of fast, cheap goods will be responsible for the disposal of those products that they're flooding the market with. So it's consumer behavior and a question about the potential of digital product passports and the potential of government nudges to alter this really worrying trend, which is so at odds with the direction we seem to be moving in right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. And all the elements that you just mentioned are prongs to a solution. And I think all need to be explored and applied. eBay did a study. 80% of Gen Z millennials bought something used last year. So that adoption rate is starting to change. When they choose
driving these fast marketplaces as well.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I've seen the pictures of the landfills in Chile that are getting overrun. I'm hopeful with some of the solutions that I've seen, like from ACS fashion and some of the buying behavior, that the economic incentive will change it. But I do think it's got to be a government push as well. You know, if you tax returns, for instance, then that would stifle some of the reckless consumption. I'm just going to buy 3 and send it back. I don't care.
And reckless consumption.
Yeah. And then, you know, if you can go through and combine a digital passport that measures multi-use or measures the elements that are used, if they're not reusable, going back to the earth, I think that could give some visibility. But I wish I had a good solve for the fast fashion. I'm just seeing some industries attack it with creativity and seeing some success.
And also leveraging social media in a very sort of addictive way, getting people to look at what's the new thing, what's the latest thing, how can I get a quick fix for whatever I'm feeling or however I want to look or whatever I want to be seen having. And yet this is disposable material, more or less. So I find that really, really frustrating to see both of these things happening at the same time. And maybe it's a question of, do we need further education of Gen Z consumers? They really understand when they buy this cheap T-shirt, and you put it in a recycling bin with the impression that it's going to some other use, but it's actually going to landfill or it's going to Africa where they don't want it either.
That same Deloitte study that I quoted, I don't remember which percent in the 70 it was, but it was north of 70%. 70% of Gen Z millennials say that they want they don't feel their company is doing enough to be sustainable, and there is no education at the company level on the impact that they're having. So there is a cry out from investors. There's a cry out from employees that are running, you know, because the Gen Z millennials are going to be the company leaders in a short period of time. If they're not already, millennials are already up there. But I think that it's going to take a legislative push, and I do think that the next generation is going to go through and mandate it more with their credit card.
I think that this is exactly typically the reaction of the CEO that everybody went upon, saying that as long as you have like a very easy, accessible transparency of and information on what is the actual impact of the product that you're buying, because today the only decision that can be made is basically on how it looks and how much does it cost.
Yeah.
But like, what would be the potential range of like going $5 more for something which is like treated differently? But I just wanted to react to this because I think that's also another side effect of the circular economy. I've been discussing this with Bath Market. They said that the fact that they made the electronics cheaper, that means that the people are now buying them more often. So the fact that they're more accessible, it increased also the rate of buying it out. So there is some kind of side effects of taking it, making it cheaper. And so like I can change my phone not every 2 years, because before that was a big budget that I had to save, but now I can change it every 4 months because it became accessible. But again, it all goes to the education and the notion and accessibility of information in the simplest possible way. So.
Unfortunately, time flies when you're having fun. So, I think there was one more question.
Just complementing your question. You talked about traceability. I think this is a key word, really. And I think we have an opportunity here with the extended producer responsibility with these policies. Imagine brands planning their recovery of their products and taking them for traceability. We are a startup that we began to do this, and we really are testing it, and we realize that that brand reputation is increasing. The more transparent you are, the more people, the more loyal are people. So these are a kind of disruptive idea, individual return of discarded items, because you've been talking about secondary market, but what about waste? What about unwanted items, unwanted footwear and everything that is coming? It is incredible, and it is a lot of value there. How much gold are in here? So I think the best thing is to make tidy waste in the sense of orderly recover things in an orderly manner, and who better than brands, than the companies that manufacture those items? Why not getting them into the chain? So it is just...
The problem is that, for example...
Excuse me, I think we have actually extended 10 minutes. We have...
It's the oldest question.
Yes.
We carry this conversation.
This conversation will go on for a couple of days, and I suggest that we start moving out. You started with something about you hope to have inspired a conversation. This has been wonderful. This has been wonderful. I think we should do that. I just wanted to say thank you so much for this. I think if I would have any comment myself, since I've been listening from our network, this is that we started off once upon a time, and this is about conversations in general. We started off a conversation about a year ago with Peter, saying that he came in and said, you know what, there is something about platforms being marketplaces that can be the link in circular economy and make that thing take off as then an example of transformations. Once we start digging into that, we realized that this thing about market was a little bit more complicated than just sales, right? And today we dug into one piece of it that is with the reverse logistics. And that whole conversation, I took notes here, he ended up about platforms building trust through grading. You need, and it has to have sort of embedded services to take off. I heard things about being sources of information, drivers of innovation. There was demands on new education. There was talks about values and conflicting and all sorts of things. There are capabilities involved in this. So apparently this whole thing about platforms, just doing this little thingy of being marketplaces for connecting the circular economy has much more than just being either a marketplace or embedded logistics, etc. They or have multiple functions. We're actually going to talk about this on Wednesday, so please come back, because I think this needs an organized conversation on the various functions. Just that, because there's so much floating around. So thank you so much for this. Thank you, Immanuela, for a great moderation, and Rich. Great meeting you.
Pleasure.
Peter, good seeing you together again, and we'll meet soon in 2 weeks. Thanks to you all the rest of you that's been online, and for making the questions, and we'll pick it up in our work on the in the network. So
great.
thanks.
Thank you, everyone.